The Japanese government says it will have to dump huge amounts of radioactive water into the Pacific Ocean. The only way, it thinks, to deal with all of the contamination at Fukushima's destroyed nuclear power plant. Let's go to Michael Serapio with more on the aftermath to the tsunami, the earthquake and tsunami, Michael, from 2011, and we are still dealing with it.
Still dealing with it, and will for decades more, Heather. And that's part of the problem here, because you mentioned the storage, and that really seems to be the key issue here for Japanese officials. And that's because they say that the Tokyo Electric Power Company has already collected over 1 million tons of contaminated water, and by 2022 they'll have nowhere to put any additional water, which is why they're now talking about dumping the contaminated water into the ocean. As you say, 8 years since the Fukushima disaster, an earthquake that triggered a tsunami that sent water inland. That water damaged the plant's power and cooling systems, and it triggered a meltdown of the 3 cores. Now, since the days of the disaster, the nuclear cores have been kept cool by massive amounts of piped water, and that's where all this excess contaminated water is coming from. But what to do with it? It is Japan's environment minister who says he can only see one option. Take a look at the statement from Yoshiaki Harada, who says the only option will be to drain it into the sea and dilute it. Now, that's Japan's chief cabinet secretary says that that is only the environment minister's opinion. He says the government is not completely decided as to what it will do, but the debate rages on, and certainly the concern is being expressed.
It's interesting, Michael. I've been learning, of course, Tokyo 2020 hosted the Olympic Games. There's been a lot of pressure on Japan to deal with this ongoing issue. And now we have this controversial plan. What has been the reaction to this notion so far?
Well, when you mentioned Tokyo 2020, and many people are expecting, or at least putting the signal to Japan, that they want this controversy to be dealt with before the games actually begin. But that said, Greenpeace is already on record condemning this idea of dumping contaminated water into the ocean. They say this is short-term cost-cutting. And not doing enough really to protect the oceans and the communities that rely on those waters economically. And to that, South Korea already summoned a senior Japanese embassy official to clarify what Japan wanted to do with the water. They are urging Tokyo to exercise some prudence here. Even fishers at home in Japan, they're still trying to essentially recover the reputation of the fishing industry in Fukushima. So they are expressing economic fears. But despite all that fear, despite all that opposition, this is an option that's been debated now for almost a year. So it's still on the table. And as the environment minister says, the other options seem to be much harder to pursue. So we're going to have to see where this one goes.
Michael, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
If you were an evil mastermind and you said, where could I put nuclear waste that would really scare the bejesus out of people, it's hard to think of one that's worse than San Onofre nuclear generating station.
This is the San Onofre nuclear generating station, just outside of San Clemente, California. It's been closed since 2013, but its operators are struggling with a problem that most plants in America share. All the spent nuclear fuel it ever generated is still trapped.